around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, well I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. 'Cause I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. I wanna take a ride up in the sky and watch those aeroplanes just pass me by. I wanna see a Lear jet liner take a dive to show all of these people what it means to be alive. 'Cause I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I do want to thank Dopey Nation for asking me to speak. I get asked to speak a lot in the Alcoholics Anonymous community, which means I have to omit a lot of my story. And so I haven't really had time to really think about the omitted part, which the methamphetamine part. Being addicted to methamphetamine was one of the ugliest times and one of the most fascinating times I've ever lived. It showed me extremes. It showed me how kind people can be and just how cruel people can be as well. And I haven't really had an opportunity to process it. And so some of the things I say may be very raw. I may get emotional. I am not going to apologize for it. I am very grateful that Dopey Nation provides a safe place for me to share this. I don't feel like there is any other place that is safe like Dopey Nation is. And for that, I am so grateful. So you think, well, how did you get addicted to drugs? And how did you get addicted to alcohol and whatnot? And I want to ask you, like, does it matter? If the building's on fire, do you want to know how it happened, or do you want to get the hell out and get out of the house and put the fire out? I'm one of 12 children. My parents were, I think in retrospect, my parents did the best they could with the tools that they had, but my parents did not instill within me the ability to draw boundaries. I was at the tail end of 12 children, and I had all these older brothers and sisters telling me what to do and how to do it. I had people making decisions for me all the time. And what that message is, that when you make decisions for people because you know what's best for them, they don't develop the ability to know what's best for themselves and make their own decisions. And so you get bullied for so many years, you end up with resentments. And I hate to do this to my parents because first of all, my father's dead. Okay, he can't defend himself. I do think he did the best he could with what he had, but he was emotionally absent. I think my mother also did the best she could considering her history, which I don't even know what it is. I can only make assumptions. So I'm not emotionally close to my mom either, but she was actually abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive, gaslighting, all that stuff. The whys and the hows don't matter though, okay? What matters is that I chose a coping mechanism that was extremely unhealthy, and that was alcohol. So I also have this rebellious streak, and to be fair to my parents, I wasn't the easiest person to live with. I was constantly challenging them. I was constantly angry for being alive. I didn't ask to be born was one of the favorite things I'd tell them. Okay, and I was a challenge. At the tail end of 12 children, they were tired. So anyway, my first drunk driving accident, I was like the age of 16. I had started college on a full college waiver. Not because I was smart, but because I wanted to get the fuck out of the house. I spent Christmas Day in the hospital. You know, a car was totaled. And the way my family handled it was to sweep it under the rug, give me a new car, make some excuses. I wasn't that drunk. And I never really was able to take full responsibility for any of these actions. I loved drinking. Drinking made me feel really good. It took away whatever pain, you know, I had when you're raised not to have boundaries or not to be able to say no when somebody gets in your space, you know, things can happen to you. You know, I repeatedly sexually assaulted as a kid and as a teenager and didn't have a support network to turn to. So I had all this guilt and shame and pain and all this stuff, and drinking relieved it. And even though the hangovers were painful and uncomfortable, the relief I got from drinking far outweighed the hangover, the pain from the hangover. And so started that habit. Drinking became a way for me to live, to cope. And I would just look forward to the next drink to get the next relief. I would never turn down drugs at a party. If I didn't like a drug, I didn't develop a relationship with it. I didn't do it. I hated the way marijuana made me feel. I loved cocaine. I was too scared of heroin to try, at a younger age. I didn't get involved with harder drugs until my 40s. Mid-40s. I'm 50. I'll be 51 in a few months. Just if you're curious about that. And then it's another thing that's just so mind-boggling is how does anyone in their 40s and whatever get into hard? You know better by now. Well, sure we do. Drinking was fun, and then fun with problems, then mostly problems. The family was ashamed of me. What are we going to do about Ivy? My family's definition of success was having a high-paying job or at least a master's degree. I am one of the least educated people in my family. I'm considered one of the least successful. To this day, by their standards, I'm still a failure. I had to learn to define success for myself. On my terms. I always wanted to be happy. I've seen rich people. My family, I've got some wealthy family members. They're fucking miserable. I wanted to be happy. I have a controlling sister. She's 17 years my senior, and she kind of stepped into this role of, well, what are we going to do with Ivy? I was raised with baby boomer values because my father was a World War II veteran. They were married in 1955 or something, or whatever. And isn't that's how close I am with my parents. When were they? So I have these baby boomer values where mom's supposed to stay home and raise the kids, and dad's the breadwinner and have all the money. But yet I was born in 1970 where the world was changing, and it was like, no, don't marry a doctor, be the doctor. So I had this conflicting message, and the whole family was like, well, what's Ivy going to do? We already had doctors in the family and engineers and all these, all the education and everything. And I was a creative. My brain worked in a different way than everybody else's, and that wasn't conducive, or I couldn't comport to their ideals. And so like, well, what are we going to do about Ivy? What are we going to do about Ivy? And so my sister steps forward and says, I'll get her a job out here in Missouri. There's a public health education position. And I moved out here to Missouri from Maryland 18 years ago. And I didn't understand really what nepotism is, but I got the job basically because I was Becky's sister, Becky was the medical director of the Missouri Regional Poison Center. And I didn't realize that how many people could have done the job just as well, if not better, that didn't have to move, that were waiting on promotions, and all of a sudden, Becky's sister walks in. And I can only imagine how I was hated at the time. Every mistake I made was a call for my firing. It was horrible. And don't forget, I'm an alcoholic. I'm coming into work late and smelling of alcohol. And it was a great high-paying job, and it was cool. And I would, and every now and then I'd go to parties and do drugs, and but I had more money than I knew what to do with. I was paid as if I was a nurse, but I only had a bachelor's degree in pre-medical science and psychology, and I was flying out of town. I would throw some extra bowls of food out for the cats, and I'd fly out to some town every week. I had a boyfriend in every city or whatever, and I was so empty inside, and I was so lonely inside. I wanted connection. I just wanted someone to love me for who I was, not for what I did for a living or how much money I made, or how much education I had. I always felt like love was conditional. My parents would love me if I finished my master's. Oh, maybe I get more love and respect if if these conditions were met. No one ever loved me for just being me. At least that's how I felt. I felt like I was living inside a snow globe, or the real world, or all the love and all the good things were inside the snow globe, and I was outside of it, or what. I just couldn't get in, And alcohol and drugs, when I did them, I didn't care. The snow globe was still there, and I was still lonely. I just didn't care at the time. So eventually I get fired from this job that my sister got for me, because duh, and I go to culinary school. So I get a culinary school degree and get into an industry that is just rife with alcoholics and drug addicts, low paying, shitty ass job, and horrible hours and drug use and all that stuff. And I tried to stop drinking. That was like the first time. Like, I had this boyfriend who thought that our problems would all be solved if I just stopped drinking. And so he started going to Al-Anon meetings, and I stopped drinking for him. And that didn't work. Surprise! So I would say I was going to an AA meeting, but I'd go to the bar first and get a couple martinis, and then maybe go to the meeting, or drive to the meeting and then turn around. And I was just so dishonest and shitty. Alcoholism and addictions dehumanize yourself. So my moral compass was already way off. Going to treatment for the wrong reason, right? For somebody else, also a no-no. Forced treatment doesn't work. This is why I'm a big proponent of harm reduction, to meet people where they are, and so they can have their recovery on their terms. And maybe their terms are a little off because their judgment's bad, because they're on drugs. Okay. But this is where you have, a sounding board, a support group, a group like Dopey, that says, maybe you want to reconsider that thought at first. But, it's funny how no one could tell me what to do, but I could sure let a drug tell me what to do. But I would have loved at the time to have someone meet me where I was, instead of say, you must abstain. AA is the only way for you, and abstinence is the only way for you. Because I wasn't. And then they say, the AA model says, well, I must not have been ready, or I hadn't hit bottom yet, which is why it didn't work the first time. Really, ultimately, the first time it didn't work is because I wanted to keep drinking. We're not going to quit until we are ready to make that decision to quit for ourselves. And who am I to force anybody to do that? Anyway, this lifestyle I was leading, the traveling and all this, all that had to stop when I went to culinary school. My same controlling sister who got me the job bought me a house, and I was just so resentful, and my whole family's like, well, why can't you be grateful? And it's like, well, here's the deal: this is what she told me. She bought me a house to live in, and then I'm supposed to get some job in a kitchen, being a line cook somewhere, and save up my money, and then pay her back. So instead of the bank owning this house, she owned the house. And so now I'm indebted to her basically for the rest of my fucking life. And oh, by the way, because I was so kind to you and bought this house for you, you're going to take care of me and my husband in our old age. And I'm thinking, well, did anybody fucking ask me how I wanted to live my life? You know, and I'm pretty sure I didn't want to live my life drunk and high, but I know goddamn I did not want to live the rest of my life pushing this bitch's wheelchair. And so this life that it was being created around me, and again, where are the boundaries? Where was I didn't know I had boundaries that I could make boundaries until I got into recovery. I never knew that there was the option for me to stand up for myself and say, hey, this isn't what I want out of life. Let me move into this little apartment that I can afford and let me live on my terms. Oh, no. So the resentment just kept building and building, and I just kept getting drunker and drunker, because when I was drunk, I cared less. When I was drunk, all my problems could go away for a few hours. And then when I moved into this house, I had these neighbors, and these neighbors were, I didn't know it at the time, but all addicted to drugs. And I come from this mentality of if somebody needs something, you help them. And I heard them talking about how they needed money and blah, blah, blah. And so I cut them a check for like, well, how much is your rent? And it was December, and it's Christmas, and you need what? So I went across the street back to my house and cut them a check for like $800. And because that's what you do, right? You help people in need. Well, these people, that I was so naive that when you finally get like in full-blown addiction, that you exploit people like that. And I was so desperate and lonely for friends that I didn't really have any, my moral compass was off. My standards were lowered, you know. I mean, someone gave me what I thought was coke at a party. It was methamphetamine, and I loved it. I loved that drug. I ended up, you know, the boyfriend that my family had approved of, the sister who bought me the house, she also like had approved of this boyfriend who's like a professional writer or whatever. He was long gone. When I finally gave him permission, I'm like, you don't have to live here, you know. He left, and here I am by myself. I was neglecting my cats. I was so desperate and lonely that any company was better than no company. Okay, I have since learned that no company is better than bad company. Some of the things that they would do, you know, just we'd get in the car and we'd drive into, say, Home Depot. And one guy would say, hey, Ivy, he went into the store to buy something or whatever, and he came back out, and we're waiting at the car. And he's like, hey, Ivy, why don't you pick out a couple of plants, you know, and he shows me the receipt. He's like, you know, I bought them in there. You can pick them out. So I'm like, this sounds legit to me. So I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. So I'm like taking my time, and everyone in the car is going, ah, ah! So I take one plant, and everyone's going, ah, come on. I'm like, and I want the best one, right? So what it was that I was stealing the plants. And the receipt was for some other fucking thing that he bought, some like 30-cent nut or whatever. And so I'm loading the car up with plant. They're like, hurry up. And we peel off. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? Like, was that? And it was kind of funny and exciting. And then at the same time, it was just really fucked up. That these were my people now. You know, that, and this was even like way before I got like really bad. I did, when things got really bad, like I ran out of money, and my bank account closed and all that. My controlling sister would come by. Oh, I also like had some people, they would come in and use drugs at the house, and I'd let them use my car, and it'd be gone for days and days. I had long since lost my job. And here I'm just being nice. You know, I didn't want anyone mad at me. I wanted friends. I wanted to be loved, and and they just, the way I was taken advantage of, it's ridiculous. It was pathetic. It was ridiculous, and I'm glad I'm not there anymore. But somebody like nodded off behind the wheel of my car and wrecked it. And so then my controlling sister, who owned the house, was now coming by once a week to take me grocery shopping. Like, I said, well, why can't I just go on food stamps? She's like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, she wanted to control what was going on. And again, it wasn't cool. And eventually, you know, I'm still using drugs, and they didn't like that. They want me to stop. And so my sister, my controlling older sister, had her husband move in with me. And then it was just a very weird thing. And he would have like meetings with me, and, you know, and here I am, I'm like in my 40s. And at one point they had drafted up a document that they took my keys, my house keys. I was not allowed to look for a job. I was supposed to like be inside the house at 10 o'clock on the weekdays and 11 on the weekends. All visitors had to be approved by them. There was all these rules, and they had them all in writing. And then it was at the bottom, I had to sign it. And they're like, and this is a 3 strikes you're out rule, that if you mess up 3 times, break these rules 3 times, you're gonna be evicted. And I just couldn't believe how I had been reduced, infantilized, you know. So the infant that I went ahead and broke all the rules in one day. And I acted like a 12-year-old kid. I was like, good night, brother-in-law. And I shut the door and I hopped out the window, and I went across the street to the drug addicted neighbors for 3 days. Yeah, I got bed bugs, you know, but by the time I finally like went back across the street to the house they had bought for me, they were like, you know, he wouldn't let me in. I said, you have to let me in. I live here. He said, nope, it's my house. I bought it. It's my money. You can't come in. So I called the police. So the police come and explain to my brother-in-law that you may be the owner of a building, but you can't force a resident out like the way he was doing. So I'm like, I'm trying to get my drug paraphernalia in there. You know, I'm trying to just pack up my shit so I don't have to deal with them or whatever. But the police, you know, so I go away for another few days, and I come back, and it's the arrangement now is they get lawyers. My own family is evicting me from the house. I totally get it. I would have evicted me too, because at that point I was cooking meth in the house. And the company I was keeping was cooking meth and destroying the house and all this stuff. And, I get it. I get that part. But this whole mentality of I pay all the bills, which means I have complete control over you. I mean, that's a family dynamic that I had to escape from. And to me, it was worth it, because I had no other, I had no other tools. Like, I didn't know how else I could have extricated myself from that toxic environment. Okay. Yes, I was doing drugs, and yes, I was making poor choices, but you know, it still was my life, and I needed to get it back. And even though I didn't want the life I was living, the fuck if I was going to, you know, again, they tried to put me into rehab. This was before then. They like drove me to a rehab, and they wanted me to go to this rehab, and like 28-day stay or hospitalization or whatever. And I didn't need that level of care. And it was voluntary. So I walked out. And they were really pissed about that. But the life that was waiting for me on the other side of that rehab was going to be just as bleak, in my mind, was going to be just as empty and lonely and bleak as the world I was walking into. You know, I was just like, you know, first of all, I wasn't ready for treatment. I didn't need that level of inpatient treatment. You know, they just thought throw enough money at a problem, it's going to go away, you know, and that rehab is some magical place that you walk out completely changed. And it's like, not if you're forcing somebody. I chose homelessness over their care because it wasn't care. It was something ugly. It was something dark, and it was not life affirming to me. And I think they just had this whole idea of me paying them back for the house they bought for me, when they're already millionaires. It was more to feed my sister's gambling habit. Oh, who, by the way, the older sister had a drug problem herself back in the day, went to rehab, doesn't have the drug problem, but she never got healed. She never explored why she started using in the first place. Addiction and alcoholism is a condition that affects us physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. If you do not have a multifaceted approach to resolving the condition, chances are it's going to manifest in other ways. Today, my sister has a gambling addiction. Not my problem. She can do with her money with anything she wants with it. But having that gambling addiction is ugly and terrible for her. But the best way for her to, it's kind of like hide it, was to blow it up, blow my problem up. Ooh, Ivy's drug addiction. She told anybody willing to listen what was going on, worrying my mother, worrying everybody on the East Coast, cutting me off. My twin sister, didn't talk to me. Nobody talked to me. She did put on Facebook, oh, my twin's dying of an incurable disease. And the disease model, right? And, I have to write a eulogy because she'll be dead soon and blah, blah, blah. I had been arrested for possession. They found needles in the car. Everyone assumed it was heroin. So Holly, my twin's like, oh, and she's telling people that, and she doesn't even know. And she's not even, granted, if she talked to me person to person, I would have lied to her. But my sister, the controlling sister, was, to kind of like get the attention away from her and her gambling problem, kind of threw me in the forefront and caused all this needless worry, for my elderly mom, because there was nothing she could do. So I was estranged from my family, and when I finally got evicted and kicked out and on the streets, there was something very liberating about it. For the first time in my life, I felt like my life was my own. And even though I made bad choices, and even though I was homeless, they were my choices and it was my life. The things that happened to me on the street, I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I can talk to people one-on-one about them, but, they're just, again, this is where I was able to see the full range of human behavior, and from kindness to cruelty. And people can be very cruel. And the world on the streets, there's currency, and the currency is sex, transportation, drugs, not food, it's money. A lot of women get exploited. I think men do too. They just don't talk about it or admit it. I never wanted to be one of those people who had to give a blowjob in an alley to get a fix. So I very quickly figured out how to get onto the supply side, knowing that the risks being on the supply side were greater. But for me, just being homeless and taking care of myself, it was all about getting enough money to buy a box of Sudafed to turn in to get a little bit of cash and a little bit of meth. Because meth would be like, that would keep me up and awake. And so I could, but boy, when you crash on that, you need a safe place to sleep. The people I would run into who would claim to be friends clearly were not friends. A lot of men would offer to take you in, oh, you can come with me, you can live with me. Oh, but you have to put out. And I frankly would have rather, and I'm like, I'm not putting out. I'm like, this is what I can offer you. I can do housework. I can do whatever, but I'm not going to give you blowjobs. I'm not going to have sex with you. I am not sleeping with you. And they're like, well, okay, well, and they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe someone would prefer homelessness to being housed with them. And like, well, that's how it was. that's how it was. This isn't to say I didn't have sex while I was homeless. You know, it was mostly unwanted. You know, I was sexually assaulted. I was, again, still so desperate for friends and connection, and looking for external sources for love and happiness, that I would believe people when, like, I would be in such denial. Like, these friends would say, oh, well, there's a guy, you know, he's interested in meeting you. And I'm like, really? You know, I need friends. I need to somehow get a support network. Okay. So here I am thinking I'm meeting someone who's potentially going to be a support network. And I don't know if it was because I was high, or if they didn't tell me, or if I forgot, or whatever. But basically they set me up with a John. And so here I am talking, and it's just like, you could tell he's like clearly bored. And one thing leads to another, and he's just like, let's just what? And I'm like, let's just, let's just. And then the next thing I know, I'm getting bent over, and the next thing I know, he's putting $40 in front of me. And I'm like, is that what I just think? And I was like, well, that never happened again. Okay. And those friends, you know, I'm like, I didn't hang out with them anymore either, but it was just horrible. You know, the dehumanization that happens, you know. There were some good times too, though. I mean, the sun was shining, you know, I'm high, I'm feeling great. There's no overhead. Like, there's all these things to worry about, but I can worry about them later. Not every day was an absolute hellhole out there, you know. And even on my worst day, I still felt okay inside, because it was my life, my choices. And soon, I didn't know exactly how or when, but I knew there was going to be a time when I'd be safe, when I would make better choices. You know, today, that day wasn't that day, but it was going to happen. I knew it. I had some old drinking buddies that I knew that once I got clean, I was going to ask them if they could help me. But before that, I moved in with some nuns for a while, and we had to live like the nuns did. So we had to do our own laundry, and they took our cell phones away at the door. They never searched my bag, because I think I was like I was the only white person in there. But the nuns like searched everyone's bags. They took your cigarettes, they took your phone, you got it back in the morning. They'd kick everybody out in the morning after they'd make us pray or whatever. We had to do our own laundry by hand and stuff. And so the nuns gave me, in the cruel wintertime, it was so cold, a safe place. And women would complain about this little homeless shelter. And I'm like, dude, this is a homeless shelter. It's not the Ritz-Carlton. This is not a fucking bed and breakfast. This is a safe place for you to figure out who you are and where the fuck you're going, how you got here, and how you're going to get out. Because if they made it comfortable, you wouldn't want to leave. And yeah, I wanted to leave. I totally wanted to leave, but I also appreciated the modest meals and the place to sleep. I came across some drug dealer guy who had a room in his little flop house. So I left the nuns and moved in there, you know, saying, we're going to get clean. I had the best of intentions. I wanted to get clean long before I did. Anyway, I moved in with this drug dealer. We get evicted. This is now my second eviction in like 2 years, or less, no, in a year and a half or whatever. I end up dating someone who gets involved with a cartel. And of course, this guy ends up being a malignant narcissist. And of course, you don't know that they're psychologically abusive at first, right? Because they lure you in. And then the next thing you know, I'm being beaten. You know, he's cheating on me. I catch him. I call him out on his bullshit. And then I'm the one who gets strangled. He would be the stories I could tell, I don't want to waste anyone's time on it, but suffice it to say, I'm not, he hit me for the last time. I called my old drinking buddies up. They came and got me. This guy's currently in prison. when I moved in with my drink, first of all, I thought meth had cured me of my alcoholism because I didn't drink. I didn't crave drinking. I didn't want to drink. Drinking did absolutely nothing for me when I was high. So naturally, when I got clean before I called my friends. So I got clean on my own. I got clean from methamphetamine without going to NA, without reaching out to anyone. I had finally learned the lesson that no company's better than bad company. And the people I called, I figured they were very open-minded. They have an open marriage. And so they're going to be they're going to be very liberal-minded and open-minded about drug use. But I was for damn sure not going to move in with them until I got clean. I got clean. I saw things with more clarity. I told this guy, just go fuck off. I start living in my friend's dining room. I don't have a penny to my name, but they give me their car. I start getting my life together. I get enough money. I'm like, I don't know exactly how. I get my bank account back together. I go back to the dentist for the first time in forever. I needed a root canal, by the way, and my friends are all going to pay for this, because they love me, those are like real friends that they're there to support me. And I remember getting a root canal. I'm sitting in the dentist chair and I'm watching the news because I thought I'd left the drugs behind. Like I said, I got clean. I moved physically away. I was no longer homeless. I was living in a nice home in a nice neighborhood. I was miles away from all of it. And I'm sitting in the dentist chair getting a root canal, and on the news, breaking news, that the police and the federal agents just cracked down on a meth ring, and that 30 people have been arrested, and and more are expected. And I'm like, that's my meth ring. That's me. I'm one of the people they're looking for. Can you imagine getting a fucking root canal and then getting that news? So I'm like, this is all going to work out. I'm like, clearly because I'm clean, and I'm, everything's going to be fine. They're going to see that I'm clearly not a criminal, and they're going to let me go. Well, they're not. It doesn't work that way. So I had to turn myself in, and which was really scary. I had to get a lawyer. My friends paid for the lawyer. I wouldn't have been able to afford any of this without their generosity and their kindness. I did cook for them with my culinary school degree, and I was a nanny for them. And so it wasn't like I was just sitting there. But one of the conditions, one of the conditions I had for pretrial was that I couldn't drink anymore. And here I am going, oh my fucking God. I have no family. I have no cats. My cats are gone. My job is I have no car. I've got no home. I have absolutely nothing left in this world but alcohol. And now you're taking that away from me too. And I didn't think it was very fair. It wasn't fair at all, as a matter of fact. So I continued to drink, and I was depressed. I was so fucked. I was like, what am I doing? I'm headed for prison. My life is, I'll never see my mother again. Even though I don't know her very well and we don't have a very good relationship, she's still my mother, and I still want to see her. If I go to prison for the 5 or 6 years they're telling me, I'll never see her again. My mom's not, she'll be 90 next year. I started drinking around the clock. My skin started bruising. I started throwing up. Like the first couple of sips would always make me throw up, but I had to persevere. I didn't realize that I was giving myself liver damage, and I did want to die. I really kind of did. I had no hope. My pre-trial officer caught me drinking and sent me to a class called Moral Recognition Therapy, which I fucking hated, but I went and I ended up loving it. I also, I chose on my own volition to go to AA meetings. I had a revelation Very weird. It was almost like, you know, I want to say somebody, my higher self was talking to me, but they said, do you want to, I was like, you know, I wanted to die, really. And the voice, this message I got was, I have given you everything you've asked for. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Are you sure this is what you want? And I'm like, no, voice, whoever you are, this is not what I want. I think I want to live. I would rather be alive and in prison than dying of this disease, of this condition. And so between the moral recognition therapy class, which I had to take because the police told me to, and AA, I treated it like, first of all, I had the gift of desperation. So I love AA. I also hate AA because I think the big book is patronizing and patriarchal. But at that time, I needed patronizing and patriarchal. I pretended it was my dad being this whatever, but it worked. It helped. In my first 90 days, I went to over 200 meetings. I was a sponge. The police only wanted me to, you know, just document one meeting a week. I'm like, next time she came to visit, it was like, boom, you know, I gave her this file and it was thick and I was learning so much great stuff. And I realized I wasn't alone anymore. And that's the power of the fellowship of support groups, whether it's Dopey or NA or AA or whatever, you're finally connecting with like-minded people. And that was what I wanted all along. What I needed was connection and understanding. I didn't share about my legal troubles in AA because, again, they were drug related. And then I was also very ashamed. But as my body healed and I got stronger, and as the date for my sentencing was approaching, I got bolder and bolder about it. And I shared more and more with people. And and it's funny, the more I shared, the more support I got. I was praying to God. I do believe in God. I call it infinite intelligence. My concept of God is so broad, people think I'm an atheist. God is not a sky daddy. I heard that term on Dopey. I thought it was hilarious. There's no sky daddy. But I would pray. And I was like, don't send me to prison. I don't want to go to prison. And as the date approached, my approach to prayer had changed too. I said, you know what? It's out of my hands. I had to let go and let things, I had to let the universe unfold the way it was going to go. I didn't have a choice. So the nature of my prayer changed. It changed to send me where I will be able to do the greatest amount of good for the largest number of people. And if that's prison, I don't want to go, but I'll do it. If I can help one motherfucker, prevent one person from the suffering, then my life and everything that's happened to me has not been in vain. My lawyers weren't optimistic. They were arguing for 5 years with some mental health program thing or whatever. And, you know, I said, well, would it help if I brought people from my meetings? And they're like, well, it might, but probably not. So I was listening to them because they're authority figures. And I actually stood up for myself. And I think it was with the help of my higher self or my higher power. I started sharing and opening up more and more in the AA meetings. And they were like, Ivy, is there anything we can do? And I said, yeah, actually, show up at my courtroom. There were 40 people from AA in that courtroom. And I had given up hope, but those AA people had picked up the hope for me. I had thrown it out the window. They picked it up and brought it back. I had lost faith, but they held the faith for me. That day, the prosecuting attorney said in her 16 years as a prosecutor, she had never seen anyone turn her life around the way I had, to turn my life around the way I had. The prosecuting attorney became my defendant. And I was the only person of the 41 people indicted that got probation. It was like a scene from the movies. It was insane. Nobody, my lawyers couldn't believe it. My lawyers literally just like fell up against the wall with their jaws open. It was incredible. It was incredible. So now I have this opportunity at life, you know. I didn't know how I was going to get out of whatever, but what I had started to do was the next right thing next, and have faith that everything was going to be okay. Not necessarily faith in a God, that Sky Daddy was going to fix it, but that everything was going to be okay. You know, I got a job at a place called the Lindell Club, which holds like 60 12-step meetings a week. It was a great way to re-enter the workforce in a safe environment. Then COVID hit. Then I got a job, an entry-level position with the federal government. How interesting is that? The feds wanted to put me away, and now the feds are now paying for my salary. So I think it's wonderful. I have a car, I have a motorcycle, I have 2 cats, I have a boyfriend, I have a modest but nice apartment. I have repaired relationships with the people I wanted to repair them, with. I don't talk to my sister. The controlling sister. I keep her at an arm's length, because just because you're in recovery doesn't mean you want everything you lost back. Recovery is really uncovery of who you are, and discovery of what you want your life to look like, and it's a process, and I'm still, learning and growing. I started studying spiritualism. They say the 12 steps are a spiritual program, and I'm like, okay. And it was just a natural step for me to go into this church, where I have a leadership role now, But if me of today went back, or if anybody went to me 5 years ago and said, you're going to have all these things, I would have been angry at you. I would have not believed you, and I would have been angry at your optimism. Again, I don't know what the future holds, but I do. When I start worrying about the future, I come back. I center myself back to the day. Today, I have love in my life. Today, I have food in my refrigerator. Today, my bills are paid. And I now know that I can reach out to somebody, a sincere, concerned person, if I need to talk, as opposed to burying my feelings. I'm still working on speaking up for myself. There's still a lot of things I have to work on. But we're all works in progress. And it's really neat, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to share my progress with you. So thank you all.
I wanna take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, well I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. 'Cause I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. I wanna take a ride up in the sky and watch those aeroplanes just pass me by. I wanna see a Lear jetliner take a dive to show all of these people what it means to be alive. 'Cause I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And my shadow is getting smaller and smaller, and I know where I stand. My shadow is getting smaller and smaller, and I know where I stand. Wonder would they pay me any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it climbs. 'Cause peace and love are very bad, they're hard to find. I wanna be good so bad. I wanna be good hurt so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. I wanna be so bad. I want